Howdy guys, and welcome to Cliff Notes. And this is a recap of episode 4 of The Amazing Race. So when we last left the racers in episode 3, we had unfortunately lost another team. We had lost the father-son duo of Jerry and Frank. I hated to see it. We are now down to 8 teams, however, as we start the next leg of the challenge. Now, the teams were in Colombia. Before they move on to another country, we do see them at the start of this episode chatting at the pit stop, and it is becoming very obvious that Leo and Alana are not happy at all with Will and James, who had U-turned them in the past episode. They're upset with Will and James. They're not trying to hide it at all. They make a mention that if they have a chance to sabotage, to hurt Will and James's game, they're going to take it. That's not a good sign for the guys to be in, since we discover that in the next leg of the race, there is going to be a yield opportunity. And we'll talk about exactly what that is in just a minute. But just quickly, remember in the last episode in the salt mines, everyone had to find either a 10 or a 20-minute hourglass that the teams had to hold on to. Well, it's going to be used at this yield point if they want to use it here. At the yield point, any team can play their hourglass on any other team that hasn't made it to that yield point yet, and make that team sit there for 10 or 20 minutes before they can proceed on with the race. And again, Leo and Alana now have a definite target, so it would be in Will and James's best interest to make it to that yield point before Leo and Alana get there, or else we know there's going to be a yield that is put in play. So where are the teams headed to next? Asuncion, which is the capital of the country of Paraguay in South America, kind of right in the middle of South America. I did a little research. I learned that Asuncion has about 500,000 people, and it is called, or one of its nicknames is the mother of all cities, because it was founded in 1537. Isn't that amazing? 400 and almost 500 years ago. But it was formed. It's considered one of the very first cities in South America to be formed by the Europeans, and so this is again the capital, Paraguay, Asuncion. It's where they're headed now. Just like last week, all 8 teams are flying together to the next destination. So it doesn't matter how they finished in the last leg, because they're all starting at the same starting point now, starting off on equal terms as they go to Paraguay. But with that in mind, just because they're all starting at the same point doesn't mean some of them don't have advantages over the other ones. We still have those 5 teams that have been working for the last couple of episodes, working in an alliance together, and they're helping each other. With that in mind, Will and James make it to the airport first because they won the last leg. They make it to the airport first. They immediately hop on some computers that are available at the airport, and they start researching Asuncion, and actually end up printing out maps. And they take these maps and they secretly give a copy to each of the other 4 teams that are racing, that are part of their alliance. I have to say, I'm really starting to cheer for the other 3 teams that aren't part of this alliance, and that would be the sisters, Kaylin and Haley, the Cajun Asian sisters, Michelle and Victoria, and then Leo and Alana. They're the underdogs. I think I'm going to be cheering for them a little bit more going forward, knowing that they aren't part of this alliance. But after the teams land in Paraguay, Asuncion, we see all the teams racing out of the airport, willy-nilly, full speed, looking for cabs. I've got to say, if I was just a regular person going to that airport and I see all these people running full speed out of there, I'd be a little bit worried about going inside. I'd be a little bit worried about what might be going on, because it's complete pandemonium as they're all looking for their cabs. But eventually, they all get in cabs. They all start heading to their next target. And where is that target? Where is that destination? They are headed to the Orquestra de Reciclados de Detour. Hey, that's pretty good, huh? Basically the orchestra of reclaimed items of the Detour landfill. It's a youth music group that plays musical instruments that they make from recycled parts that they find in the Detour landfill, which is just outside the Asuncion, the town. It's a cool idea, making these recycled instruments. But as they're all racing to this destination, a new lesson to be learned, a new strategy, or something to keep in mind if you're an amazing racer. Make sure that your taxi driver knows where they're going. And even if they say that they know where they're going, don't assume they're telling the truth. Quiz them and find out and make them maybe prove you, show you on a map or something. Because what we discover, we watch several teams who quickly realize, as soon as they get out of the airport, it seems like quickly realize their driver has no clue where they're going. So they abandon the taxis. They just get out right in the middle of wherever they're at, walk around till they find some other taxis, someone who actually can pull it up on a phone or something and figure out where they're going. I think if they'd said this Detour, which is the landfill, probably most of these drivers, I assume, would know at least kind of where to get them to. But the orchestra of the landfill, maybe that's a little less known. And so it becomes a major issue for a lot of teams, even more so for the sisters, Caitlin and Haley, because they stay with their driver. They ask her, they said, do you know where this is? Do you know where you're going? The driver said, yeah, no problem. This driver had no clue. No clue whatsoever, but she didn't say that. She told them that she knew where it was. They only find out much later that the driver really didn't have a clue where she's headed. As a result, they are the very last team to arrive at the landfill location, and they are way behind. It's hard to tell time-wise, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're an hour or more behind all the other teams by the time they finally get to the landfill. But once they get to the landfill, we quickly learn that the first roadblock of this episode requires that one member of each team has to build a recycled cello using parts that they first have to salvage from a big pile of trash that they've set off to the side of the road. Empty drums, pans, things like that. They put on gloves and just scavenge through and find some specific pieces that they're told to find. Once they do that, they proceed just a little bit on down the road with their big bundle, and they start building this instrument. Now, I don't see any directions. It's not line by line, this is what you do to build it, but they do have an example of finished cello to reference to help them figure out how they need to build this thing. And so pretty soon we've got all the teams, except for Kaylin and Haley. It take a little bit longer, but most of the teams are there trying to build their cellos quicker than anyone else. And once again, this five-team alliance comes into play. It works great for them because these alliance members are helping each other build their cello. So they're all going a little bit faster than the other teams that aren't part of that alliance. Now, D'Angelo of the pro football team, he brags that he is a master at building IKEA furniture without using any directions, so he shouldn't have any problem with this. Having built many a Barbie house, many a bicycle on Christmas Eve, I think I could give D'Angelo a run for his money, but he does think that he's going to be very good at this particular challenge. And he's right. He proves to be the expert because he is indeed the first person to finish his instrument, takes it inside, gives it to the orchestra of these kids. One of them plays the cello, and it sounds pretty cool. And when they finish, he gets a clue to proceed on to the next leg. So right now, D'Angelo and Gary, the football team, are in first place. Some teams do have major issues with their cellos. Eswar of the brother-sister team takes him a long time. Kaylin of the sisters, it takes her an incredibly long time. She was already behind because their taxi took forever to get there. But then actually building the cello, I think it took like 3 hours and 57 minutes. So right at almost 4 hours for her to complete her task. So it only puts them that much further behind everyone else. So we see everyone completing their cellos and moving on to the next leg of the race. And what is that? It's onto a market stall where the teams finally encounter the yield box that we talked about. Now, Will and James luckily get there before Leah and Alana do. I think they get there second, right after the football players. They get there before Leo and Alana, or else they would have absolutely been yielded and had to sit out for 10 or 20 minutes. But as it turns out, all the racers that show up that have a chance to use their yield, no one uses it. Not a single yield was used at this point. I'm kind of surprised that Eswar and Arpana, the brother-sisters, didn't use it because, again, he had a hard time with his instrument. By the time they got to this stall, the only team that they were in front of was Haley and Kaylin. And it would have made a lot of sense to use it on them, just to put them that much further back to assure that the Eswar and Aparna weren't going to finish last. But they don't use it. They say, no, we're good. We're not going to use the yield either. So no one uses it in this particular leg. We'll see it again later in the race. But after the yield, each team must then make a thermos of the national drink of Paraguay called Terere. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. It involves crushing a bunch of fresh leaves and then adding in cold water to kind of steep it and make this national drink. Well, I haven't been to Paraguay, but I have been to Argentina, which shares a border to the south, and they have a very, very similar drink called yerba mate, which it's like tea, but it's using cold water instead of brewing with hot water. And so it's made exactly pretty much what we see in this episode. So I thought I'd do just a little show and tell for y'all and show y'all my mate and my straw that I got while I was in Argentina. Can you see it here? Neat little drink holder. The straw is really cool because it's got a little filter so that you can drink it and all the leaves and everything don't get clogged up when you're drinking the drink. So there you go. Yeah, that's one of my favorite little show and tells. I drink a yerba mate out of my special little container. All right, so so they all have to make it. Doesn't seem to be a major challenge. They all make it, fill a thermos up and drink it. They all seem to like it as well. And then they take it with them for the rest of this challenge or the rest of this episode. After that, however, we do then have a detour, and it's an incredibly difficult looking detour. They have two choices. They can either stack watermelons in a 10 high pyramid, or they can do a slow dance while balancing a bottle on their head throughout, which I guess is a thing in Paraguay. It's cool watching these women do it that have 3 or 4 bottles all balanced and they're doing their dancing. They just stay up there like they're glued on. They aren't. They're just amazing. The balance is incredible. But the teams have to balance a single bottle on their head, and both of the members of the team together have to do the slow dance without dropping the bottle the whole time. Seems really hard. I personally, when it comes to picking one or the other, I personally am adverse to doing anything that has to do with watermelons. I just want to stay away from watermelons. I don't know why. It just makes me not want to do anything with watermelons. But having said that, it does seem like stacking watermelons would be a little bit of an easier task. Gary and D'Angelo go for the watermelon stacking, thinking it's all about strength, having to carry all these watermelons, stack them up and everything, and that's right up their alley. Not really, though. It seems like it's a lot more about precise placement of these watermelons. Their stack keeps collapsing over and over again. It looks so frustrating. You can tell they're getting frustrated. And it's hot. It's November in here. I think it's probably 85, 90 degrees in Paraguay and in their summertime because they're south of the equator. It keeps collapsing. They're getting really frustrated. They end up being the last team to complete this watermelon part of the challenge because it takes them over 4 hours or right at 4 hours to complete it. So they're the first ones there, but they're also the last ones there. They have a hard time with it. Meanwhile, at the other side of the detour, Will and James choose the bottle balancing, and we soon learn why. We see that they actually practiced balancing bottles on their head before Amazing Race even began, because they had this same challenge in season 20, I think, of the Amazing Race, and they just happened to watch it. They practiced balancing bottles just in case the challenge came up. And so it paid off. Their preparation paid off. It seems like they accomplished the task with a lot less difficulty than anyone else. Now, they drop a few bottles before they figure it out, but they're the first ones to complete this side of the challenge, and it doesn't look like it took them that long. Hung and Chi, on the other hand, they start off trying to balance the bottles and quickly give up. They just can't get it figured out. So they take a risk, and they give that up and go over to the other side to complete the watermelon stacking instead. But they still managed to finish before Gary and D'Angelo. Oh, I felt so sorry for those guys. With the bottle balancing accomplished, Will and James rushed to the checkpoint, and they finished first for the second week in a row. So they've Hung and Chi the first two legs. Now Will and James have finished first in the last two. They're doing good, and it's good for them. They stayed ahead of Leo and Lana because they definitely have created a little bit of an enemy. But they finish in first place. They're incredibly excited. Eventually, the rest of the teams come straggling in. It's hard to tell how long from one team to the other, how much time there is, but it is dark by the time the very last two teams finish, and it's a race to the finish. And eventually we see Gary and D'Angelo, again, it's nighttime, but they make it to the finish line ahead of Haley and Kaylin, who finish in last place. Now, it's dark. We can't tell really how much time there is between those two teams at the two different challenges. So it could have been a lot of time. It could have been incredibly tight. I think it may have been a lot of time. Again, Haley and Kaylin were behind throughout this entire episode because of the taxi. But Haley and Kaylin finish in last. But It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because we find out that this is a non-elimination leg. The sisters are still in the race. They're going to have to do an extra challenge on the next episode because they finished last, but they're still alive. So there you have it, guys. Racing all around Paraguay. Looks like they may be going to Europe next episode. We'll find out more next week. Guys, y'all have a fantastic week. Enjoy the amazing race. Cheers. Safe travels. Bye, guys.